Hey everyone, we are excited today at Real CFO Podcast here to have Paul Childers with Blue Sky Solutions. Did I get that right, Paul? Blue Sky Solutions?
Blue Sky Biz Solutions.
Business Solutions. I'm sorry. I knew I was missing one
Oh,
word.
good.
And Paul's got a unique thing about his business that a lot of us as business owners don't think of. And the more and more I get into business and meet business owners, it's something that's really needed out there. So today is going to be very educational, hopefully motivational in terms of some stories that he'll probably share and a little bit about his professional journey. But hey, Paul, before we jump into all of that and what you do and how you help small businesses, can you tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, kind
Yeah,
of your
yeah. I live a very nondescript, some would even call boring life. I grew up in Minnesota, was raised in Fairmont, went to college in Minnesota, found my wife in Minnesota. Now we live in her town, her hometown. She was a daughter to a farmer in the middle of West Central Minnesota. So we've lived in a town of 1,400 people for the last, probably 13 years. And that's where we kind of raised our family. We've been married for 15 years. We've got a daughter who's 11 and then our son who's 7. And coming out of college, I graduated college in 2008. So right in the middle of the recession. And finding a job was difficult. Finding a job rural that paid well was even harder.
I'm sure.
So the first couple of years out of college, I just ended up doing whatever I could to make money and kind of keep ends meet. So I had a couple sales jobs. I did some farm work, worked for my father-in-law and some other local farmers in the fall to help with harvest, which I still do even now, because I think from a mental standpoint, it's just nice to go out in a tractor and keep my mouth shut, get told where to go and what to do. And I don't have to worry about nothing. My brain just kind of turns off for a little while, but,
right.
So that's, that kind of started my journey professionally. Like I'm in the middle of nowhere in a really small town. And how do you find a place to work, that aligns with what you went to college for? I have a bachelor of science in marketing and business management. And it was tough to find something that was suited for that. So I really ended up job jumping a lot for probably the last like 15 years, 15, 16 years, I've jumped jobs a lot, but each time I've jumped jobs, I've gone up, ladders and positions, right? So I started out working retail for like Menards. Then I was a service manager for a Case IH dealership, got into some sales, then went to Target, worked there as a manager hourly, before finally getting into car sales, which is really what elevated me into where I'm at now, which is owning my own business. Automotive started really everything for me in terms of like my knowledge and what I know, especially when I got into a Chevy dealership and we started doing fleet financing. So, that's overall, my background is just, I'm a small town boy, married into a farm family, very blue collar background, very I know a lot of the guys that I meet, face to face that I've met in social media aspects, like what you are. And that's what it is with me. Like I am what I like. I'm going to show up to an event, probably wearing shorts or jeans and a t-shirt, maybe a polo. But that's just the way I live. Right. We value the small town values of just helping other people out, doing good by others, and going to bed knowing that, you don't owe anybody any favors because you went out of your way to make sure people are taken care of. So.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, man. I'm in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Maybe not quite as rural as you are, but I grew up in a rural town. There's something to be said for that. And I love my son was involved in band, and I was involved in athletics. Growing up and being in these small communities. You got the town square. Everybody supports one another. It just gives you a different vibe and a different approach to why you do certain things. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. I mean, being a CPA myself and working with a lot of small businesses, I see firsthand some of the impact that what you do and the services you provide can have for businesses. And that kind of segue into what it is you actually do.
Yeah.
Right? You help businesses get business credit,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Yeah. Essentially, it's, building business credit the right way and understanding what it actually does for you and what it won't do for you. And going back to my automotive time, that's really when I got my exposure to my first time, like my first encounter with business credit. I remember, sitting in the office doing a deal, and I got a call back from GM and Ally that was like, "This client is, elected for the commercial portal," and I'm like, "I've never heard of a commercial portal before. What, what's going on here?" So call my underwriter. I'm like, "Hey," "I got this weird callback. You guys are telling me I can put this guy into a commercial portal." I'm like, "What does that mean?" They're like, "Oh, he qualifies just on his business. Like, we don't need any personal information for him." And I'm like, "Okay, like how, what qualifies him just under his business?" So my natural state of being is, anytime something comes up that intrigues me, right, or like captivates me, like, well, why is this way, and how come not everybody is able to qualify this? Because previously we'd had a lot of similar businesses come through that didn't get access to the commercial portal. So my
Right.
brain immediately goes to, well, why? So that's where my journey kind of started in all this was, well, okay, so they've got a business credit score, plus they've got clean financials. There are definitely, myths that are out there, I think, in the business credit world. But
Yeah.
really, if you got a good business credit score and you've got good financials, you don't have to be grossing as much money as people think you do to be able to get your first vehicle under your EIN only, right? You may not get a full fleet, but we can at least start building that history for you. So I started applying the things that I learned in that finance office to some of the business owners that were dealing with us to be able to get them into like fleet programs and stuff for us to be able to move more vehicles. Because if you've ever done anything in automotive, the more vehicles you turn, the more vehicles you get allocated, the more money you get as a dealership. So one of the fastest ways to turn vehicles in allocation is fleets. So we started teaching people how to do more of this fleet financing so that we could move more fleet inventory.
Okay.
COVID hit, my kids started getting older, and I was just getting burned out, I think, from just all the hours I was building. And I think always throughout my time, as I mentioned earlier, I jumped jobs a lot. And the similarities between when I jumped jobs is every time I felt like a ceiling was starting to come down on me, I would jump and make a move. And I didn't always know why until I started doing my own business, but it was probably because at the core of my being, something was always driving me to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know what that was or what it meant at the time, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we all get there at different states. But when I left automotive, I went and was a sales director for a national tire company, and that was a fine job. But we mutually parted ways. They brought in a new board assist that basically I felt devalued my job and what I did for them. And I'm not going to go into a ton of details just because it's not super relevant to the business credit side. But when I left that tire job, it was February of last year, because we'll be 2 years in business this next March. But I looked at my wife and I said, I don't want to go back to work for anybody else. I'm gonna do my own thing. And because I was tired of people telling me what my value was, right? Being tired of having that glass ceiling put on me.
Yeah.
And so it took a while. Like, what do I know? Well, I know commercial financing, I know business credit. And so I had started just to start posting about it online. But essentially, the core of what I do is I help business owners, especially those that are in like home service, blue collar jobs that have high asset, high expenses, that are probably right around that getting to 7-figure and up number, learn how to access capital and scale without always having to use their personal information, or at the very minimum, go through lending sources that won't report back to your personal credit history. Because I truly believe those things need to be separate.
No, that's awesome. And I see it all the time. I mean, individuals buying cars on their personal name, putting it in the business. There's risk associated with that, both from a personal standpoint and so business credit is huge. I'll be honest with you. We've bought assets and things through business credit, but as a business owner, uh, I guess I've never looked at my business credit score. I mean,
Yeah.
where does somebody get, and I hate to say that, but full disclosure, it's not something that I look at. We're an accounting firm, a CPA firm, tax credit firm. We're not buying assets, we buy some computers, equipment. So we don't have a large need for outside capital per
Yep.
se, but how does one get started to say, okay, this is a new concept for me. I like it. There's benefits to it. I want to learn
Yeah.
more, but how do I even find out what my business credit score is?
Yep. So there are a couple ways. With Experian, you can use, that's usually the one that I trust the most. Experian or Credit Safe are the two reports that we usually pull when we're working with clients. And I offer in groups like free credit pulls for people all the time, just because, I'm already paying the yearly fee for it. Why not? Because it does start a good conversation. Business credit reports you can get through Experian Business. Credit Safe is another one you can go through. You can pull information through Duns and Bradstreet. I see a lot of people go to Nav. I don't like Nav so much, because what happens with nav.com is when you pull a report and give them information, they basically are funded by like third-party data centers. So they sell all that information, and that's what opens people up to getting all these spam calls from all these different lending companies and everything. So I just try to stay away from that extra exposure. But Experience I use, you can get like Identity IQ. I've got a link with Identity IQ that allows you to monitor your personal and business credit at the same time, and that's like $44 a month. If you're actively building your business credit, it's good to have. But just pulling a report, usually I say, you're going to pay probably $25 per report through Duns and Bradstreet or Experian. Otherwise, if you are on a friends list with me, you can always reach out and we can pull that stuff for you for free, just to see where you're at.
Yeah.
So, but
that's good information. Now let me ask you this, because I've gotten calls from Dun and Bradstreet before, years ago. Even in one of my businesses, I signed up because they sold me I could get a list of all these businesses, right, and access to all these business names for marketing and all this stuff. But when we talk about business credit, I hear you need a DUNS number. Is that truthful, or does everybody have a business credit number? DUNS is just trying to sell something, or is it actually a DUNS number?
The truth be told, you can build it without a DUNS number.
Okay.
The DUNS number, and you can get these for free. Like I tell people, I'm like, you don't need to pay Duns and Bradstreet for anything, but the number itself is a very nice mechanism, and they're still deeply tied into the business bureau side of things. And so having their number, as well as having your Experian BIN number, just allows the facilitation of data and information to be done so much faster than if you're doing it without one or the other. So, and in most cases, what's going to happen is once you get a Duns and Bradstreet number and get that information all updated in them, it's going to go and just update Experian and Equifax as you're making purchases and doing stuff with your business credit anyway. So it just speeds it up and makes it a lot cleaner.
Okay, good. So I got sold on Duns and Bradstreet, more from a marketing.
Yeah.
But I get calls occasionally at Dun and Bradstreet, or I get the emails that you need your Duns number and all that. So if somebody gets that call, reach out to Paul and ask them, do I need that? How can I work with you to get it, and maybe actually get educated in the process?
Yeah.
Like we are today, huh?
You can do everything. You can honestly, you can set up your business credit information essentially for free. I mean, the only time you really have to pay for any data information and entry is if you're changing stuff on your Secretary of State, and that's by state laws and codes, right?
Yeah. So how do you come into it? Are you, let's say I come to you and say, I want to check my credit report.
Yep.
Or I want to set up a DUNS number so I can do these things. What, you have a process, kind of a systematic process that you run everybody through, just kind of depending on where they are at in that cycle?
Yep.
I guess I should say.
Yep. My biggest things that I always want to know with a business is what kind of business do you have? How much money are you running through? Do you have ending balances in your bank account? If you're not generating between 10 and 20K consistently with money left over each month, the chances of you being able to sustain and build business credit probably isn't going to be that great, because business credit takes expenses in order to build, right? You got to run expenses through your credit accounts and your trade accounts, and have that paid off every month on time or early, or it's not going to build business credit. So for some clients, it just doesn't make sense, because I'm not going to go out there and be like, well, you've got to find an additional, even, $200 a month in expenses that you got to run through these accounts in order to build business credit up.
Okay, so let me stop you. Let me stop you there, just so I'm following. For a business to get started, you're saying 10,000 is probably the floor in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But then also there's kind of a floor of the amount of expenses they need to have on recurring credit, or
Yep.
okay.
So every vendor has a minimum.
Is that credit cards, truck loan payments?
It can be suppliers, right? So if you and this is why I like to ask what kind of industry are you in, because if you're in a home service or a construction industry, chances are you've already got these expenses that you're running through one way, shape, or form. We just need to verify that the forms you're going through report to business credit, and then we can, roll those in and just go with them, because you've already got the expenses there. Where it gets a little tricky is if you don't have these natural expenses already occurring in your business, and we got to go find some expenses, because you have to have 3 to 5 trade lines that are reporting before everything else kind of starts getting reported. So even before your credit card will start showing up, you probably need to have some form of other store credit or vendor credit through, for example, like Amazon Business, Uline, and then have a fuel card through Wex or Quick Trip, Pilot Flying J, something like that, right? So you need a combination of those 3 things plus that credit card, or plus that vehicle loan, because chances are most vehicle loans for businesses usually end up reporting to personal credit anyway. The amount that I've consolidated or refinanced is pretty high, but you got to have a combination, and you have to have 3 to 5 of those before anything will actually start reporting. But you can't have those unless your business is set up accurately from the get-go, right? So the data that you have in Secretary of State needs to match the data that's being presented everywhere else. So to go back to your question of that being a ground, I just like to make sure that they're capable of paying their current expenses before we even look at layering anything else on, because the last thing I want to do is cash strap a business and make them have a bad experience with building business credit because they weren't ready for that jump yet, right? So there definitely is a point where I think you either are ready for it or you're not. And I've started businesses that, I've got a buddy that I've been working with that he didn't actually jump into his business until about a month ago. But he had been working a W-2 job, and we had just been manufacturing business credit for him by having him spend, a minimum of about $500 to $600 a month on all these different vendor accounts and some credit cards that we opened in his LLC. So now when he jumps into his business this year, we're going to go back and apply for probably an Amex Business Gold card and a couple other credit cards, and he'll end up with around $75,000 to $100,000 that he'll be able to play with. That isn't going to show up on his personal records because we took time to do it, but he had additional money to use to grow his business credit during that time frame. So you've got to be making money and using money to build your business credit.
Making money and using money to build your business credit.
Yep.
No, that's good. That's good to know. How soon, if I say, okay, I'm an individual, I have an LLC, I might meet kind of right at those lower thresholds that you say, I come to you and say, I want to build my business credit.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit, or does it matter how your personal credit is before you build your business credit?
No. A lot of the vendors that we send people through are They don't require personal guarantees on them, so they don't look at your personal information, at all. So like you can build your business credit without having to use a personal guarantee or personal information on anything. I always say there's always plenty of good reasons to have good personal credit. I mean,
Sure.
outside of the business world, always do what you can to have good personal credit. But from a business credit standpoint, business credit really doesn't care at the core of it what your personal credit score is. And so that's one of the common, misconceptions out there, because I can build somebody a business credit score for their business, even if they had a bad partnership previously within the last 4 years that collapsed and went under, they filed bankruptcy, personal credit isn't great, but now they're running a new company and the new company is financially viable and strong, right? We can still get them access to vendor credits and build them up into the point where they can apply for and get vehicle loans. But in order to do that, you've got to have a good business credit score and you've got to have a really good cash flow, like cash flowing business, right? Because that's how you offset the needs for personal guarantees and personal views on a lot of loans. So the answer to you is yes, you can. But the longer form of it is, I think everybody should do what they can to have good personal credit and invest in fixing it, because it makes life a lot easier.
Right. You probably, like me, get those. Shouldn't say all. A lot of times you get introduced to people because they need you yesterday.
Yes.
Right. For instance, IRS letter comes in the mail. Hey, I got this letter. I don't know what to do. Somebody says, call Chad and his team.
Yep.
That's how we get introduced to a lot of clients. Or it might be a business owner that says, hey, I need a balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and 2 years of tax returns so I can go and get this loan.
Yep.
Right. And so now it's scramble mode to get it. I'm guessing in terms of business credit, you get the same thing.
Yeah. 100%. Yep. And really, I think a lot of businesses, and you probably experienced this too with your, running CPA stuff too, is a lot of businesses don't plan for lending like they should, right? Like I always see courses all the time about like, oh, you got to have sales processes in place and you got to have good operational processes in place and like blah, 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 blah. And like, yes, you got to have good financials, but what does having good financials actually mean? Like, if before you go and apply for a loan, you better know that you have good cash flow. You better know that your tax returns are good, right? Like the amount of businesses that I end up having to kind of turn away because they didn't go through a right CPA. And so their profit, their tax returns show losses for 2 consecutive years. Well, the SBA isn't going to look at you, especially if we can't roll that money back in and show that it was just, owner income getting put back in and making it a profit, right? Like, So having a CPA and having a CFO that understands that stuff matters. Well, what else matters is, what is my personal credit? What do I want to accomplish in the next year? I know that if I want to apply for an SBA loan, that I'm going to have good personal credit, because the SBA is always going to look at my personal credit score. But I want to buy vehicles, but I don't want to do it with using my personal information. Okay, well, then we have to have a business credit score in order to do that. And that takes typically a very diligent business owner, unless there's like a good history of stuff that you have on record that we can, when we redirect the data to the accurate, most recent business, and can report all these other trade lines that have been out there just reporting to nothing because your information wasn't correct. Like, unless we can do that, plan for this to take 6 to 12 months for us to build it to a point where you can start getting access to those types of loans. Can we get you smaller deals and like credit cards and stuff like that earlier on? Sure. But the bigger stuff that you're looking for, if you're not already doing this like yesterday, plan for 6 to 12 months from when we start.
Yeah.
I've had some that we've turned around faster, but that even faster is still 3 months.
Yeah, it does take time. So just like with anything, you got to plan, you have a vision out there of what you want your business to look like. And that's the problem. So many owners or entrepreneurs don't have that. But it starts with having that vision and then kind of walking back and say, what's it going to take to get to that vision? And if that includes having accurate financial statements, tax return because you might need working capital, you might need investors, you might need this, that, the other. You've got to draw that out and kind of take steps to plan those. And, it might not be right away when you start a business that you say, hey, I need to call Paul and get business credit. But once you start operations, get your systems, SOPs, everything's kind of flowing, you're making some money. Now might be the time to start it, because 3 years from now, you might need to go buy a fleet of 10 vehicles, and waiting 6 to 12 months to get that done, right?
Yep.
May cost you 50, 60, $100,000 in lost revenue.
Correct.
So those are the things that we often, as business owners, when we first get started, because we're so in the weeds and everything, we don't foresee those things until it's too late. It's the same in the accounting world, CPA world. I get calls daily. Hey, I got a message Sunday from a friend. Hey, got this issue with a friend that this state of XYZ is coming to seize her assets for not paying sales tax. All right. Typically, states don't do that unless they've tried to communicate and work something out with you for 3 years.
Yep.
Right. So this isn't a today thing. Right.
Yeah. This was a 3-year ago thing.
Yeah. Like I'll try to help tomorrow and see what I can do and get some contacts.
Yep.
That's what we call the oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of when it comes.
And that's what it is, with a lot of businesses with lending too, is they wait and they almost use lending as a survival tactic. And I can tell you from the amount of businesses that I've looked at and helped, and I'm not even that old in this industry, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know everything or have seen everything either. But if you start going after loans to try to stay afloat, chances are is your cash flow is already way behind. Your sales are falling behind. You have fundamental process breaks in just your selling and operational side of things that until you fix those things, a loan is only going to speed up your demise and doom.
Yeah.
And I've learned that from, being a GM for a Chevy dealership and being a sales director at a tire store that was nationwide, is if your sales process and your marketing process and your operational side of things are bad, loans aren't going to help you at all. Like, they're just going to bury you faster. Right. So that's why it's so important to have these things in place. And that's why I don't usually like to work with businesses that aren't consistently making, that 10 to 20K a month with money left over, because it's just, they're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that's good stuff. So if you were to kind of leave 2 to 3 thoughts with the business owners, entrepreneurs that are listening to this, what's the key to kind of at least think of and maybe take that first step?
Yep. The very first one is, what do you want to get out of business credit? It's kind of like everything. If you don't have an idea of where you want the end results to be with it, you're not going to stick with the program and you're probably not going to benefit from it. Right. So like for me, I have a home office. I don't have a lot of overhead expenses. So I'm making up a lot of different expenses each month that aren't necessarily natural for me, but I have a long-term picture of what I want to be able to do with my business credit, right? Yeah. It's going to be a fundamental piece of acquisitions and stuff as I grow and get bigger. But for some people, you may not have a need for business credit, and that's okay. Like it isn't for everybody, right? And not everybody's going to benefit the same. The second one is, if you think that you're going to need a loan this year still, and you're worried about, cash flow, and this is going back to you as well. Like if you're worried about your profit and loss statements, you're worried about cash flow, you're worried about your personal credit, you're worried about your business credit to know if you're going to be able to get a good loan, you need to talk to somebody today, probably actually like 3 months ago, really, for us to be able to dig in and help you put a path in place to be able to get you to better lending and get you to better money. Is number 2 is the biggest one there. And number 3 is, don't believe everything you see on the internet, because there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Sure. You just got to trust your gut. If it sounds too good to be true, chances are it's too good to be true. right? So business credit isn't going to be built for you overnight and in 30 days if you've never started. Getting access to a bunch of business credit cards when you have never gone through and done any foundational work is not going to build you business credit. So like, just check the details, look deeper for more better information, and reach out to people that do this for a living and get the good information on it so that you're doing it the right way.
No, that's awesome. Paul, I appreciate you being on. It's tons of valuable information. I know you can go a lot deeper, a lot broader on this topic, but that's not for today because we don't want to scare folks away. But for anybody out there that does need to go deeper and needs to understand more, and is a position where they're going to be expanding or scaling their business, and they want to set that foundation early, knowing that they can't put everything on their personal credit for forever. Right, to start building that business. How do they get in touch with you, Paul?
Yeah, easiest way is obviously through email. Paul at bluesky.biz solutions.com. Otherwise, Facebook is really where I'm probably the most active, in LinkedIn, and that's just Paul Childers. My name on the screen here. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. But reach out to me there or send me an email, and I'm definitely willing to have a conversation and get you started.
No, that's awesome. And again, I appreciate it, Paul. Everybody listening, Paul's a wealth of knowledge. I've interacted with him in a few different groups online in the community. He's a giver. He gives information to all of us in the group. It's solid advice. So at minimum, if you anticipate needing or currently do need business credit, at least reach out to Paul, shoot him a message on Facebook, Paul Childers, and I'm sure he'll get back to you. And, it may go nowhere, but, at least you get some information of what he's about and where he's at. So Thanks again, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you.